hello, friends and hopefully family members at some point of our wonderful cast. My name is Britty, and I will be hosting tonight's first episode of Rolling Misfits, where my friends and I, tonight we have Ferret and Matt, will be talking about our campaign on Rolling with It, Gaecia, and discussing how we feel, talking about our feelings, that sort of thing. Tonight, as I said, I have my first guest, our lovely DM, Ferret. And our lovely Fire Ganassi, Matt.
Hey there.
I really hope that we haven't lost Ferret as soon as I started it up. I didn't say anything called his name.
I was wondering. That'd be quite the start.
That would be quite the start, but we'll get started without him just in case. I did have a question specifically for you, Matt, because as we saw in our first few episodes, there's been a little bit of, not party conflict per se, but definitely some differences in opinions in our party members.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Definitely
I sometimes feel like Phoenix is always right in the middle of it.
Definitely some disagreements, I would say. So, as a player, it's sometimes difficult to actually deal with that and separate the character from the player, and disagreeing with your fellow players' characters, but not having the players disagree with each other. So how do you navigate that?
I mean, it's always the temptation, isn't it, to, when you know people well, like you've played games with them, or you've been around them, or you're just friends with them for ages, like when you're just conversing with them and it's their voice, or almost their voice, sometimes you just want to, like Yareth is on the tip of my tongue, and I'll almost say Riley, and it's just like, no, don't do that. I'm addressing the character, not the player. I think that's the distinction that usually keeps me in line. I'm always addressing the character.
That's a good way to put it. Normally I would have a question here for Ferret, but at the moment he seems to be having some internet issues. So I wanted to hand the floor to you, Matt, and ask you how you felt about the campaign at large so far.
Well, I mean, while we're on the topic of character interactions, yeah, a lot of inter-party conflict already, which I think is a great thing, because it's, I don't know about you or your experiences with prior D&D games. Obviously for viewers watching, this is the first campaign me and Britty have ever been in together, or any kind of D&D experience. We were all kind of pulled in under the umbrella of Ferret through mutual friends, Lumi, and maybe familiar with an older campaign that was streamed, wasn't it? The one with Lumi and Socks.
A few other people, yeah.
I don't know which name.
Socks was going to be a part of it, but as I remember, they never ended up being part of it.
Socks might be dropping in as a little surprise guest every so often in our campaign, so look forward to that. He's a very fun role player. I look forward to seeing whatever he does. But yeah, a lot of potential inter-party conflict starting early as well. I mean, again, it feels bad. I always feel like Ferret's somehow in the middle of it, so we're starting off with a little conflict of pragmatism versus honor.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing with this party. A lot of difference in how the characters grew up and what they were taught, and that's definitely caused a lot of learning experiences, but also a lot of, wow, this person does something incredibly different than me. This is weird. I don't like this.
Yeah, so different doesn't mean it's bad.
Exactly.
No, I think it's a really good thing, because it's always a case of, as I was getting to the point before I kind of went off on a massive tangent, in prior games that I've played, sometimes you get very, what's the best expression, sanitary parties. Characters who don't disagree, they're all perfectly in agreement, and it can be fun to have that kind of unity of purpose, but at the same time, you want a bit of rough edges. You want something to jump off on in character interaction. I think sometimes having differences that can cause arguments, conflicts, the occasional cold shoulder, I think that's good for creating those jumping off points, like Phoenix and Ash as the earliest example I think we saw in this campaign. I think that is going to be a recurring theme of conflict because at heart, Phoenix is a very pragmatic character. He doesn't see kind of honor as particularly useful unless it's towards a useful end or it's a thing that gets in the way of a solution as opposed to a solution in and of itself. Whereas obviously Ash is very much a more principled character who grew up with a very set series of beliefs that drive her and her actions and choices. And both opinions are completely valid from a character point of view, I think, at least. So those are the best conflicts in my mind. People who are coming at a position from two very different viewpoints, equally valid in their reasoning, but with different aims and different methods, if the same goal. Like, ultimately, I believe both Phoenix and Ash are good people. They want to do good things. They just see very different ways and maybe have slightly tweaked definitions of what that good is. Because obviously Phoenix doesn't see much inherent good in an honor duel, but if the honor duel gives us back all that equipment, that is a good thing. Phoenix just also doesn't necessarily see that not cheating just a little bit to help us along, like breaking the honor part of the honor duel, is necessarily a bad thing.
Sure. That's what we'll call it.
Yeah, that was a player judgment that went wrong. I vastly overestimated how much help those bandits had.
I mean, it was an interesting moment. I'll give it that. No.
Yeah, actually, pivoting off of that, Ferret, I'm sure you didn't know exactly what to expect bringing all these players in who haven't necessarily played a campaign together.
Yeah.
And as a DM, how do you manage that? How do you figure out, like, okay, I know all of these players individually, and I know that they are good players. How do I not guarantee that they mesh well together, but, like, besides hoping, what do you do besides that to, like, hope? What do you do besides that to hope that they mesh together?
I mean, there's only so much you can do. Like, at the end of the day, if these two people aren't going to get on, they're not going to get on. Like, it's not like a co-worker where, you can just go in every day and just, like, meet the semblance of playing nice. Like, this guy is meant to be your friend. One thing I did do was kind of, I was in between the Gwent and the Gaecia. Like, after I'd found all these people I might potentially be playing with, we did this little murder mystery one shot. That was kind of cool, and so obviously I got to see everybody in action and then everybody in action together, which was quite useful. So obviously that definitely helped because obviously I saw meshing there, and that was quite interesting.
With your clever little misdirection of, hey, do you want to be the murderer?
Yeah,
you said to every character.
To our viewers who don't know, before this campaign started, Ferret had hosted a little, not a Halloween-themed one-shot, but a murder mystery one-shot where, before the one-shot had started, he approached each of us in turn and asked, hey, do you want to be the murderer? And obviously we all said yes, because, we're D&D characters. We love that shit.
Like,
that's a
it
fair
would be
point.
a red flag if you didn't say yes. Like, that would be
I was actually going to say, Ferret, what would have happened if one of the players said, no, that's all right. I just want to like play the normal way.
I mean, if someone had, that'd be fine. Like, it would just be everybody else but that one person. That would still be equally a cool moment.
Like wait, you're all
I'd be the one guy.
Well, like, if you remember back to the one shot, there's the moment where you're like, hang on, you made all of us the murderer? And that was cool, but like, it would always be called like, wait, everybody but me is the murderer? And like, obviously, I would know that going in. I'm sorry, they would have like tailored it differently. So, obviously, what it was it kind of played out so that you go through, and there wasn't really many hints until that kind of final revelation. I would have planned it differently, so there was kind of more classic murder mystery. There was one thing that you kind of found as you went along that would point to different people. Then obviously at the end it reveals, hang on, it was all of them but this one. And that that could be kind of fun because presumably that one would kind of naturally step up almost to kind of the chief thinker, because everybody has to be talking around them and like well, it's kind of like Among Us, I guess, to an extent. You know, they always pointing fingers everywhere, but like, obviously, they're going to be the one person who's like, honestly working to find out who it is. Obviously, if you're a player who is the murderer, as soon as a finger pointing at you, obviously you're in a very different position to the one you were in the game. So, I think it definitely could have worked. I just would have had to plan differently. I just need to know that going in, I guess, for the prep step.
It was definitely a lot of fun, and having played the few campaigns that I have played with you, I have to say I really enjoy your DMing style and the way that you are able to incorporate these characters and bring them into the story, so it doesn't feel like I'm just watching the story happen. It feels like I'm a part of it, which is really nice to me.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
And while I'm on the topic of complimenting, I love all of my fellow players. Matt, I love the way that you play Fenix, the snarky asshole, but also, like, dark and mysterious, but also, like, open to talking about the stuff that hurts him. It's such a, like, interesting mix of all these different character tropes that works out in a really interesting way. I love him to death.
Fenix was, he was fun to build. He could have gone a very different direction, to be fair. Like, when I was building him, I was really torn, especially after the kind of opening episode that viewers might remember was the kind of big explanation of Gaecia as a setting with the races laid out, the kind of general geopolitical situation, which was really useful as far as the character creation went. I was really torn between Gaecia and Yuan Ti, which, just as racial choices, would have taken Fenix, or whatever his name ended up being, probably not Fenix if he was Yuan Ti, down a very different path, because I have two wizard archetypes that I love to death, and that is the Divination Wizard, which I ended up taking, and the Illusion Wizard, who I did try to play in a previous campaign. The campaign unfortunately petered out a bit, so I never got to kind of fully realize the aspects of Illusion Wizard I love, but I didn't want to retread that. I didn't want to go, oh, new campaign, I'll just do the Illusion Wizard again. That felt like a disservice to the campaign. So I was like, no, dude. Start a new trail, do something new, don't look back at the past. So yeah, so there was a indeterminate Fenix that was a Yuan Ti Illusion Wizard who would have been a very different character. Far more covert and tricksy.
It's funny because in a similar way, when I was building Fleet of Foot, I am normally a very much a warlock player. I don't know what it is about them. I just really love the limitation of the spell slots and the, oh, you owe your power to this higher being, but it's not like you worship them. It's like you're kind of begging them. That says a lot about me as a person, but I find that really interesting.
They are definitely very campaign-heavy classes. Like, I play in a one-shot society, which is my main form of Dungeons and Dragons. And in that setting, warlocks in general are a bit like they can't really explore their patron.
Yeah.
The nature of society play means that their spell slots are even more limiting than normal. It kind of formed the basis of my opinion on warlocks in general. So I've never really had the best opinion of warlocks as a class. I can understand the appeal absolutely from a roleplay perspective, but I've always found the mechanics far too limiting in the main format that I play. So I can absolutely understand why people play them in campaigns, because I just not to LARP on Critical Role, which obviously is the first thing people think of when they think of D&D, but obviously watching Travis play his character and the ability to explore the patron is always fascinating. One of the best parts of the early campaign too. I can understand the appeal definitely from that perspective.
Yeah, personally I find Warlock super fun, but when I was building Fleet of Foot, obviously I initially was thinking like, oh, how can I make a Warlock fit in this setting? But I just sort of realized to myself, I play Warlocks a lot, let's try branching out a bit. And the class that I love the most, but I don't play as often, just because I'm always playing Warlocks, or I'm not in campaigns, it was Monk. In a campaign that Ferret was running a little while ago, I had a character, a Warlock, die, and my backup character for them was this crazy old man monk who was Way of the Drunken Fist, and I thought that was like super fun. Like, oh, just punching the shit out of stuff. That sounds great. So I wanted to bring that into Gaecia, and when I heard like how the Tabaxi society was, I was like, oh, that's perfect. But I don't know how comfortable I am playing a Tabaxi. I don't know if I can like get behind that. I don't know if I can make that work as a player.
Can we deal with all the furry Khajiit jokes?
Oh,
Yes, that was definitely a big part of it. But thankfully, because Ferret is such a lovely DM, I was able to bring in this idea of, oh, a half elf but half drow, and bring that like parentage mystery into it, which again is something I always love having fun with, because I love, as a player, I love giving the DM as much like potential with my character story as possible. Like, hey, here's something my character wouldn't know. Go have fun with it. Which a lot of times can be a death sentence, obviously, because giving the DM power is a curse and a blessing. It's a blessing because, you know, they're the DM, they're gonna have the most knowledge of the world, they're gonna be able to give you the most, like, the most flourishing backstory that fits in the best, but also, it's terrifying not knowing.
Oh, see, the few times I've been in that position, I usually give them even more freedom. I will literally say, like, not even here is something they do not know. I will just leave a gap in the backstory and just say, that is a gap in the backstory because they legitimately will not know this thing. Feel free to go wild with it.
Oh yeah, that's something I would never not do and make a character, is not have something that the DM can just run with, or at least one. Like, you know, obviously, like, going back to Warlock, the very easy one is the patron, because there's just so much that you could possibly do with that. Like, it's just so much freedom, and obviously, the more freedom you give to the DM, the better they can fit your character into their world. So if you're someone who likes, the DM working into your character and playing on character specific thing, the more fuel you give your DM, the more they can do with it. Like, yeah.
See, I have to admit that was another reason why I was obviously my sour disposition towards warlocks in general, but specifically in this campaign setting, because obviously you did such a wonderful job of laying out the kind of geopolitical situation and the gods, but obviously warlock patrons are sort of far from that. You don't necessarily know what the archfey, demon, elder god situation sort of is.
Yeah.
And with such a character-defining thing like the warlock patron, like there are certain things I'm willing to leave to the DM, certain things I'm perfectly happy kind of putting in their hands and knowing they'll run or do something cool with it. Like, just the entire identity of something that I've sold my soul to. I guess that's like a difference between me and Britty, but yeah, that's not quite something I'm willing to put that far out of my control.
I mean, Riley knows absolutely nothing about Yaris Patron.
I was about to say, speaking of warlocks, we happen to have one in this campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's so many questions I'd love to ask him about his character creation, because that is genuinely like, just the choices people make when they create the characters is one of the most fascinating things about D&D to me. Like, Fleet as well. Just the choice to be a half-drow, and obviously knowing the reputation of drow in this, like the specific reputation, like obviously most settings have some sort of negative connotation with drow because Forgotten Realms is a trendsetter, but specifically knowing that these are the god killers, they are hated by dwarves, they are shunned by elven society, and then still choosing to pick that, just a very interesting choice.
I like a little bit of spice in my characters.
And on that, I have to share, I guess, something of a commiseration between our characters. In that, obviously, this is it would be a massive imposition if it was like the first thing that was brought up every time, and it would just get tiring. But the fact that like Phoenix is on fire and Fleet is a drow probably doesn't come up as much as it does. Should.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, yeah, as you say, if you do it every time, it'll get boring. So it's kind of things like, yeah, it does happen. It's just we'll only RP it when it's relevant to like the story. So, when you go and you meet a dwarf and he's like, "You're a drow, fuck off," kind of thing.
I imagine things would have been very different if we started the campaign, and I imagine things would be very different if we started the campaign in Weether. Like that would be very different reactions to.
Yeah. As we were talking about Riley's character Yareth earlier, the idea of the warlock who doesn't patron. We have a few other interesting characters in this campaign. We've got Althea, who is Bard Cleric. I know based on what they have told us outside of the campaign that the character is based around keeping the idiots alive, which is me and Lumi. Hello, we're the idiots. I think that's, as a support player myself, I think that's really cool and really fun. But I'm interested to see how. I mean, we've seen it a little bit already, but like how much that ASMR influence can get us, and how far that take us before stuff starts turning negative.
I think we're almost at the very cusp of that now that we're leaving Akaran.
Yeah, and we got a little bit of that negativity with her mom, which I want to talk about in a later episode. Save that conversation for later.
Preferably one with Nat here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
He's taking a well-deserved break at the moment. Like, viewers be aware that he's not here at the moment, but it's for a very good reason. He has earned this evening off.
So let's talk a little bit about the first few episodes that we were in. Obviously, starting off with meeting Althea out of the blue and having to run over to this thief bandit camp and figure out what to do in that situation. Like we were talking about earlier about that dichotomy of character ideals really showed up super early in this campaign.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a trope, but it's a good trope to start in a tavern. It's one of those things where, like, it's very easy to just try and labour for ages over why this particular set of people, you know, got together, but a tavern is just a place where anyone could happen to be, and it's just so good that you can just, oh yeah, you're all there, and then something happened, and then that something it just kickstarts everything. And it's, you know, some people don't like starting a tavern, they like it when you start elsewhere, but for me it's just it's a classic for a reason. It just works.
It makes sense. You've got a bunch of people sitting in a bar, because what else do you do?
I definitely like it. Like, it's a trope for a reason. I've started a campaign before where we were all just kind of teleported in the middle of the night to a location, and that to me always reeks of, oh, you are the chosen ones. And I've never particularly enjoyed that style of like, I enjoy the fact that, other than Althea, who was in fact the inciting incident in this case, like the rest of us, we could have been anyone. Like, anyone could have been there in that tavern when Althea came in drenched and bloody. But it just
so happened that it was all the non-humans in the tavern. But, you know.
Yeah, there was probably a sneaky half-elf in the back.
Well, maybe.
The coward.
That was certainly not the way I was expecting it to start. I can't say I know. Obviously, I don't know what I'm getting into when I hop into a campaign for the first time. When we started in the tavern, I was thinking, oh, a bit of a slow start. That's all right. We'll ramp up into more exciting things, and then bam, Althea comes through the door. That was super exciting, and I thought it was a bit of a kick in the pants to, oh, hey, let's get this kick started.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You need that kickstart moment. There's no point droning on for ages about nothing. Like, it's kind of like, well, it's essentially a cold open. You know, you got cinema and TV shows, so you got that opening bit of the show or the film. It's got to be something that, you know, kickstarts everything, and it makes sense. This is why we're starting here. So obviously, you know, with Althea, it kind of just worked. Like, when I was talking to you guys about making your characters, I had no idea exactly how we were starting. I knew Akaran, that's about it. But as soon as, like, she talked about the whole, you know, oh, I want to be, you know, associated with merchant, maybe, you know, doing some jobs for him and stuff. That's like, you know, that was when I got the idea. Oh, should we attack my bandits? We could just use that. She stumbles into the tavern in the black of night. You can just, you know, see it playing out in the movie. Like, you got the tavern full of people. It's pouring rain. The door, you know, smashes open. There's the hooded figure, drenched. And it's kind of, I need help, please. Like, you know, it's so cinematic. And, you know, you often hear me, like, at times go and talk about, oh, the shop happens like this, because I always like to think, like, when I'm DMing, what how would this look like if it was a film? Like just the cinematic kind of spectacle is kind of one of the main things I think about, as I'm designing stuff. And obviously that particular moment was just clicked and it just worked so well. It's obviously why I went with it.
I have to say, I also appreciate the fact that, like, as I was saying, I do like the fact that it was that sort of anyone could have been there. It could have been anyone. It just happened to be you sort of vibe. I did appreciate the later revelation that also applied to even Althea, in the fact that, like, no, she wasn't attacked for a reason. She wasn't attacked because she was an ASMR. She wasn't attacked because she was some destined chosen one. No, it was because the bandits fucked up and they were looking for someone else. It was, yeah, I like that.
Well, it's the story hook in it. It's the setting up of the intrigue and the mystery to make you want to follow it. And that's what you've done. That's what you continue have been doing. Like, that one note led into the second episode, which is what led me into Hope, which is led the rest of the campaign for the foreseeable future. Like,
I do like that about your DMing style as well. It does all flow very well. Like, things logically connect. Things make sense that we are now here and we are here. We can look back and go, oh, wow, we're all the way over here now. But there was never a point at which I thought, wow, that was a sudden turn. Like, everything was organic. Everything was set. Even ostensibly the biggest kind of reveal of the campaign so far in Hope and the Fenacama situation is, no, we were forewarned of this. The bandits were looking for people. We knew they were looking for someone, and we just happened to come across the person they were looking for, which makes sense because we were walking down the route they were staking out.
Yeah.
Like, we could have just gone an entirely different way, I suppose.
We're essentially chosen ones by proxy? Because we have the Fenacama, and we are protecting what we assume is the Fenacama at this point. And we're protecting her, so that means we have chosen ourselves. And the gods are now like, okay, yeah, if you're gonna protect her, here, we're gonna help you out. Which is another point we're gonna go on in a later episode, Phoenix's refusal of this gift.
No, it's really interesting. That is a great moment.
But for now, we're gonna stick with the earlier episodes. Yeah. I don't remember if this was episode 2 or episode 3 where we actually discovered Hope and the first owlbear we encountered.
That was episode 2.
Yeah,
the final final encounter of episode 2.
I actually had a question. Did you plan for Hope to be a tabaxi the entire time?
It's difficult to talk about this because obviously the reasoning behind who she is and what she is, you haven't got anywhere near yet.
I imagine the question is more in context to, did you plan her after or before knowing?
Yeah,
what Fleet of Foot essentially was as a character.
Oh, no, after. Definitely, way after. Way after I knew about Fleet. The kind of tabaxi in your relation to tabaxi it's almost incidental. It just worked out. That wasn't something I necessarily planned was for you to have that connection. It just happened that way, and I'm glad it did.
I mean, nobody plans Fleet. Fleet just
Fleet happens.
Yeah. Which, again, like you were complimenting Phoenix earlier, is only fair enough to repay the favor, and I do love Fleet. She's one of those characters that's, I think, undervalued in campaigns, but is so necessary. Just that kind of universal glue of, you could slot this character into any party and they would instantly kind of bring them closer because they are just so open and welcoming and accepting, and they could take any kind of band of misfits within reason and forge that, as you love to say, family.
Yeah, everyone is family. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah. That's going to be almost certainly going to be another point of contention down the line. Different definitions and connotations with the word family.
I mean, we've already seen it happen. We've had, I think that's been a big part of this early campaign. These characters, like, and their interactions with their family. Like, the difference of Althea and her mom at home versus Fleet and her, like, 20-something siblings and 20-something parents. I think it's really interesting to, like,
whatever the hell Yarek's going on.
Explore that.
He's the Lord. He's got a noble family. Come on.
Naturally. And then whatever Ash has got going on at home, which I think, as far as we're aware, is the least touched on backstory. We know very little about Yurashi's.
Yeah. You haven't talked to her a great deal about it, and there's not been opportunity for it to come up yet.
No, Lumi has a job, so
We've just sort of accepted Ash as you're one of our enforcers. You're going to be big and punch people.
Although again, it comes back to that. I really love people's like choices when they're character creating. An ancestral guardian barbarian is such an interesting choice because it is far from the two most common options of berserker and totem. So
I do think that's interesting, and I like the way that Lumi has sort of rationalized it, and like, oh yeah, Lumi cares so much about the ancestors and about like how the past affects the present. So obviously, this character is going to care a lot about the ancestral spirits. So ancestral barbarian makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, like it's something that I didn't know until she leveled up to level 3. Obviously, that one choice she's made in her character creation, that's just opened so much for me to do with. Like, later down the line in like her like more personal arcs kind of thing that we can explore. Like it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like when you make a character, make things that your DM can use to make the game interesting. Like if there's one bit of advice I would give to anybody who doesn't know how to make a play, it would be that. Like something you would just give your DM anything to do with, and they will just run with it a million miles, and it will be great.
I do think that this is like now totally opened up the idea of orcish spirituality, which isn't a common theme in a lot of like D&D settings and campaigns, because now suddenly you have the idea of, oh, is this just like Ash in general, or is this like a really big orcish ideal of, oh, this is what the ancestors do, so this is what we must do.
Could even be a political thing.
I think that's going to be super interesting to explore later, but I'm also a religion like nut. I love mythology and religion, so that's obviously tickling my fancy a bit.
I mean, while we're on the subject of episode 2, and specifically the owlbear encounter, I think that brings us on to the party's wildly different approaches to combat.
Oh, yes.
You didn't take damage for the first couple of fights, and everyone else but Arashi was like,
no, because
down on 1 HP.
Because Felix is apparently the only one with a blaze survival instinct.
Everyone else does blame Arashi.
Yeah.
Fleet does have to get in close, to be fair.
Look, just because I tried to feed the owlbear does not mean I don't have a sense of survival.
If it was a regular owlbear, that would have made sense. Like,
it's not my fault it wasn't a regular owlbear. I don't have eyes.
No, we didn't know something weird and magical was going on with the encounter. Something capable of killing an entire party of guards and the bandits ambushing. No, that's just a normal ass owlbear.
And look, I figure it was already injured, it got into a big fight, it must be hungry, maybe we can make friends with it. And when we find a real owlbear, I am making friends with it. This is a promise.
I don't doubt you in the slightest.
Because a little bit of spoilers for the character, but that's like, Fleet has mentioned this in passing. Fleet, like, really wants to bring peace to people and wants to bring people together, which has been under duress a little bit given the Dragonborn incident.
That's a different episode.
Okay.
Again, something we will talk about further down the line, but that extends to pretty much everything. Like, whether it's the party members trying to discuss what's the difference between honor and, like, practicality, or an owlbear that might just be hungry and hurt.
And I think another one of those kind of inbuilt party sources of conflict that I think will crop up down the line, or even frequently, is I think the difference between Fleet and Yareth as far as kind of openness versus secrecy goes. Because, I mean, it's not hard to realize that Yareth is quite a secretive character. He's clearly got things going on behind the curtains.
Oh, absolutely.
The accent, for one, but that's, again, down the line.
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Oh, no, you're right.
Yeah, obviously us as characters have no idea about this accent, but the players, we're starting to question that.
Yeah, luckily this is the player show. This isn't the character show. That's the other one. Tune in on Wednesdays for that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how
weird.
that can of worms.
People talking in character. That'd be weird.
I am excited to figure
I mean,
out
that's
more
a
about
plan
Yereth.
down the line, isn't it? We definitely have one of these where we're all in character talking about our character moments from the previous game. That's got to be an idea.
That's definitely, again, something for the future. We'll think about it. But yeah, I'm excited to figure out more about Yereth. I want to know how Yereth, this almost pompous character, got in contact with this patron, and does it know about it? From what we've seen, Yereth obviously believes he's a wizard.
I'm just waiting for that inevitable Phoenix question of how do you accidentally sell your soul? how do you accomplish that?
I mean, I've personally tried to toy with this character idea in the past. I don't know how successful it could be, but a warlock character who, as a part of their pact, sells part of their memory, and part of that memory is them making the pact. It's an interesting idea to, like, toss around in your head. I don't know how feasible it would be. I don't know if I would just, like, expose Yereth's whole character right there. Hopefully not.
Oh no, I can absolutely see a fiend patron running with that. Absolutely, like specifying a certain time frame of memories.
Kind of like that contract kind of thing, and you say,
oh yeah, but it's very much that kind of stereotypical fiend fine print thing where they can specify that. I'll take a month of your memories. That's a trifle. It could be anything.
Well, when they're selling it, you say, "Oh, I'll just take it when you're a baby." Don't remember when you were a baby anyway. Like, it's fine. It's just a technicality.
And then they fail to specify which month they'll take.
Yeah.
It just happens to be the one where they, sign the contract and actually know what the terms are, which makes them far more likely to break them.
Going back to Yereth being a wizard, there's a point that hasn't been clarified in game, but I think it's fine to clarify out. Is he thinks he's a wizard because that's kind of what his patron gave him. So when we discussed it during character creation, obviously there's his background, which makes sense, but I'm going to go into. But it's basically his pact was his patron. He gave him the ability to be a wizard, essentially. So it's basically like he is a wizard in game. Obviously his mechanics are different. It's just it was given to him by this whatever this patron is. So that's how he's kind of flavored. It's kind of similar to Althea in a way, because obviously she's bard cleric. However, the way we're flavoring it is she's not a cleric and she's never been religious. She's not studied. It's more that because she's an ASMR, it's kind of innate divine things. Really makes her closer to divine soul sorcerer really than anything else. So obviously, like, it's a thing like you don't need to be constrained by whatever your class would typically be. Like, if you want to be, more barbarian like, but you want fighter mechanics, like, that's fine. There's no need to compartmentalize each class into certain things that are based around what they do. Like, taking a class and doing something as far away from the typical as possible is great. Talking about barbarians, I've got this idea that I've wanted to play for ages. Is this gnome barbarian? Just instead of raging, they just completely shit themselves. So it's just a massive panic, fight or flight thing, and they kind of just randomly slash out, and then like at the end, I'm like, hang on, wait, what happened? Did I do that?
That couldn't have been me.
Yeah, I'm just a little wimpy boy. That's just one of the things I've always wanted to try.
I do love the ideas of characters going against the tropes of their classes. Like, again, for me in Warlocks, the Celestial Warlock subclass is my favorite because I'm a support player, but it also allows you to, like, sort of go against the grain of, oh, the patron is working against you. They have something that they always need, but it always comes at a price. You have to be careful. It lets you, like, take it that extra step of, oh, maybe the patron actually, like, gives a shit about you, and maybe they're just, like, giving you the extent of their power. Like, hey, this is all I can give you. You get 2 spell slots. I'm not that powerful. Good luck.
Although, while we're on Warlocks, and this is something I'd love to explore more when Riley is here, who unfortunately is not, the choice to be an intelligence-based Warlock, that confounds me, because even as much as I don't necessarily like the Warlock class, like I admit one of the benefits of them is the fact that they are a charisma caster and therefore make with certain what's the word? The choices you can make as the warlock.
The invocation?
Invocations, that's the one. Sorry, the invocations. With certain invocations, you can be a extremely passable face class, and then to give that up to be an intelligence-based warlock. And obviously, thematically, it fits absolutely with Yareth, who believes they are a wizard, and that is the nature of the gift, obviously given by their patron. But that is also a choice Riley had to make in the process of character creation. It's like, why would you give up the charisma casting of a warlock for intelligence casting?
I do like that fits a lot with the character, and I'm personally a player who is always willing to make the character slightly worse if it adds on to the flavor of the character or how the character would act in game. I live for the drama. My older sibling is a theater major. I learned it a lot from them. So when I see a character when I see a player I rolled really well for every single one of my stats, but I want to take a negative in something. I live for that shit. That just fuels me.
Unfortunately, I am not that kind of player. It might be because it's it's escapism. It's a little bit of power fantasy. What is a role playing game if you don't get to play powerful characters? Might be just because I've only been playing D&D really for a year, so I'm still kind of in the infancy of the various stages I imagine all D&D players go through. So I'm still very much in the not power gaming necessarily. I've never really liked power gaming where it's all about the numbers and the highest numbers. Gotta have the highest numbers. I still like having a character who is at least competent in the thing they are supposed to be good at.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Although I think we're stretching a little bit into the philosophy of D&D, so taking it back to something a bit more campaign specific. Fair. I wanted to ask you about your preparation, because outside of the game you've talked to us about you guys are moving a bit slower than I expected. Obviously, you have to, as a DM, you have to guess what your players are gonna do, and you have to try and make it so oh yeah, if my players do this, they're gonna go down this pathway, and I can plan for all that. What happens when the players don't do that? And hopefully at this point in the campaign you haven't had that happen yet.
No.
But how do you plan for that as a DM? Because I personally have never DM'd, so it's not something that I have much experience with.
It's not something I really have happen. While I wouldn't necessarily say I railroad, there's a main plot thread that I bake into every encounter. So it's kind of at the end of each game, there's an obvious, well, this is what we're going to do next. While I like to give you guys options, it's normally at the end of the game, there's only so many routes you can take. There's one main story and you'll broadly follow that. I'm not forcing you down it by any mean. It's just the nature of how I plan. It's just so there's that main story, and that's where you go most of the time. At the end of the day, if you truly go off path and I can always just improvise and stall with RP,
which we've done a lot just as players in general.
Well, yeah, but even you go into a town, oh well, you decide to get a shop. Oh well, I'll just make up a backstory for this shopkeeper, and we'll just RP you shopping for an extended, just to kind of draw it out of the session while in the back of my brain thinking, what do we do? What do we do? I generally have a idea about the local area, towns and stuff, so I could always initially set up so you meet this NPC who as you walk in kind of jumps up behind, please help me, oh, my mother's been kidnapped, and if you've got half a session to go, you can spend half the session where oh, you go to the house and you set up clues. You just make up the clues just on the spot, oh yeah, you look in the cupboard, oh, there's a toothbrush missing, that's weird. And you don't have to have a plan, because if you make it to the end of the session, you can take that, and then you can work out what happened, what the mystery was that you've set up. Oh, excuse me a second.
That's not a way I thought about it before. That's super interesting. That's really good insight behind the DM screen.
I'm such a different DM. I have to be as planned as possible.
A bit more of
That's what-
the even though it has a bad connotation, a bit more of the railroad style.
No. I really typically try and avoid the railroad. I just like. I try and make it so that the path I see the players going down is just the one that makes the most sense for them to take. As Ferret said, there is always and most often the chance that players will just go off rails, do their own thing. And in those times, I am perfectly happy to vamp, but the vamping is always in effort to steer them back on course.
Yeah, because sometimes your players might just be like, you know what? Fuck this. We're gonna open a tavern.
Which is fun enough, and it's one of those things I imagine is a bit easier in a campaign setting. Like, again, Society one-shots, my main form of D&D. So really, I only have to kind of think about the 4 hours I am DMing. Whereas in a campaign, obviously, things that happen have ramifications further down the line. But at the same time, you then have a week to kind of course correct or think about the new direction, all that kind of stuff. Like the way I DM, it's always I have to get them towards the end goal because I only have them for this one session. Like if they want to go off and piss about, that's fine, but I am still doing my best to tell them a story that should preferably have a start, middle, and end.
Yeah, it is one advantage of doing a certain campaign where everything is middle. There's a certain pleasure to that. And yeah, you can take as long as you take. I was honestly expecting last game to not have enough prepared, and I'm banking on this combat not being over super quickly, and then you never actually started the combat. So
Which
I think you've repeatedly said in this campaign that we roleplay a lot more than you're expecting.
Yeah, it did end up working out as Lumi had to drop out for work reasons.
Yeah, it's nice that one of you didn't have to run into the combat. That's always good.
Yes, we definitely want our barbarian going into this nolly combat.
Yeah, this seems like it's going to be rather difficult, but I also think the RP afterwards with this unicorn is going to be so worthwhile, because we still don't exactly know how we're going to get the tears of a unicorn.
Maybe it'll be so grateful from us saving it that it'll weep in joy. I can dream, Harold.
Yeah, you might have to work a bit harder for the 500 gold, or however much I said it was.
And honestly, I wasn't even expecting to run into the unicorn this soon. I thought we'd have to do something at the tree. Thought something would be wrong.
We're not at the tree yet, so
I know we're not at the tree. That's why I was like, oh, this okay, unicorn.
It's worked out. Thank goodness.
How are we gonna fuck this up? Because we've just been handed a unicorn, so clearly we're just going to mess something up.
Yes, the party with a barbarian and a monk have been handed a unicorn. How are we gonna fuck this up?
I mean, at the end of the day, that was what you said. You weren't expecting to find the unicorn, so I put it in front of you earlier. This is something that you weren't expecting, therefore it's interesting.
This is now a challenge that we have to overcome because, oh god, this is like a precious creature that is very rare. How do we get it to do what we want without, hurting it?
We gotta save it first.
Yeah, that's obviously a big deal. We're gonna have to save it first.
I mean, gnolls might be animalistic, but they're not unintelligent. If they think that they're going to get an advantage by, taking the unicorn hostage or threatening the unicorn, then,
as far as they know, we're not after the unicorn yet. That's a matter of what happens when we get into this combat.
I mean, they have a unicorn, and I imagine we'll be the one ambushing them. It depends how Ferret roleplays their kind of tribalistic intelligence, or if they're just straight up intelligent. It could be. We don't know. We don't know what gnolls are like in this world.
No.
There's a lot we don't know going into
what they are.
I'm excited to find out.
Was that none of you know what a gnoll is?
I know you can be gnolls.
Going back to
maybe the G isn't silent. Maybe they're gnolls.
Gnolls.
Gnolls from Gnarnia.
Going back to our earlier episodes, I think it was the end of episode 2 where we had Hope going off into the cart. One of you is going to have to remind me where we started episode.
So we started episode 3 where you're taking Hope off the cart and you're taking her away from the battlefield, and you walked into the sunset. That was where you ended. I remember that because it was quite a memorable way to end.
We had to do a little bit of recap on episode 3 because of the VOD issues on episode 2, but the actual start of episode 3 was the camp that night, and then the introduction of the Invisible Stalker.
Yes, the Invisible Stalker. That is an interesting opponent that we're going to have to face at some point. Hopefully not soon, as the last time we encountered it, the gods literally said, "Hey, you can't handle this thing, book it." Something told us. My character assumes the gods, so I, as a player, do the same.
Yes.
I still love the Abriel introduction. Still love the Abriel introduction. Quick, hide! Slam, bag of ash in the face.
I mean, it was a good plan. It was a great idea.
It made sense in Phoenix's head. Like, invisible thing following us, big bag of ash, use it. And then, obviously, Abriel was like, "Oh no, these people need a bag of ash."
No, he only came out because you failed your checks to escape it.
Oh yeah, we also totally fucked that up.
Yeah. I can't remember what you wanted. It wasn't good. There was 5 of you, I think at least 2 of you rolled under 5. So there's no way I could BS you past that as a group. So again, that was not something I planned. I didn't plan for Abriel to have to come out and help you. That was just
we were just very bad at rolling dice.
I mean, have you seen my damage rolls?
Another thing to talk about, Ferret and your cursed damage rolls as a DM, because again, with the games that I've played with you, my god, you just cannot roll damage on roll 20. Something about the algorithm just does not like you.
I can at other times. It's just, especially this campaign, it's just not gone my way.
Is the mansion fight just going to be its own whole episode? Because some of the rolls in that where we just miraculously escaped because of the garbage damage rolls from the guards.
Oh man, I think there was only a few times where you managed to roll above a 1 on the dice.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was was it 7 1s in a row on D6s?
Something like that. Something ridiculous like that.
And we'll never know because that VOD was lost.
Yeah.
Due to some technical difficulties. No, that one is fine. Just 4
we don't have the...
Oh yeah, that was session 5. We lost session 4 and 6.
Dungeon crawl.
We lost Ash beating the shit out of Fleet.
Wait, did we also lose Fleet kicking the shit out of the Dragonborn then?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was the big...
That was in the dungeon crawl, yeah.
Yeah, so some important things lost in that.
Yeah, that was a hard choice to make.
My bad. Yeah, it's obviously when I do my recap, I'm working on the episode following right now. But when I do that, I'll make a point of all the important things. Yeah.
Stress just how much Fleet got the shit kicked out of them by the barbarian.
Just do a stick figure drawing of a drow just getting the absolute shit beat out of them. I thought I had a chance because I had the first swing, I had the first 2 hits where I wasn't going to be hitting into their half damage. I thought I was going to get a really early hit. I just didn't roll at all.
No, I would have said when you beat the initiative, I would have thought, okay, so low level monk versus low level barbarian. She can't rage yet. It should be interesting, at least fairly even. And then just you absolutely whiffed the first round. I was like, okay, no, it's about to get.
It's over.
I think the pit brawl was episode 5.
No, that was episode 4. I've got it in my notes.
Was it?
It
was how we ended the episode 4, wasn't it?
I've got. I literally have it in my notes as
Now we have our note takers figuring out what exactly happened to when.
Yeah, no, I've got it in my session 4. Ash beat the shit out of Fleet in a boxing ring. My exact wording.
Yeah, maybe.
That also featured Oscar the barkeeper. That lovable grump.
That is basically what happened, though. Fleet really thought she had a chance. God bless her.
But before we get too far ahead, because we are kind of skipping forward to kind of admittedly very fun details in later episodes, I just wanted to come back to just the session 2, session 3, that whole first real meeting with Hope. I really loved obviously most of the reactions towards Hope, all of the reactions towards Hope really were some vein of positive. I just love the fact that our entire party had such a range of reactions to Hope. Like, you've got Fleet, who immediately went absolute mothering instinct on Hope, like absolute, I will protect this child with my life because it's a child and family. And then you've got Althea, who's a little bit stepped back from that, who is just as protective, but not because obviously it's a child, it's because that is Althea, she will protect the innocent. And then you've got, I think the next step back would be Ash, who is like, I will protect this child because it's the honorable thing to do, and it's a child, and that's the correct, right thing to do. And then you've got Yareth and Fenix on different veins of,
Yeah, Yareth and his inability to call this child by her name. The child.
My favorite thing is Yareth's constantly getting called out for it, and Fenix has done the exact same thing.
Oh dear. And then there was that one priest who called her the child as well. Oh, that was fun.
Look, Fleet might have a decent intelligence modifier, but it doesn't mean she's smart. She can only focus on one real thing at a time.
Intelligence is book marks. Your wisdom...
My wisdom is kind of low for a
14.
monk.
It's higher than your intelligence.
Yeah. If we're gonna talk a bit about the stats of our characters, my poor monk. I think I probably should have rolled stats first and then decided a class to play, because having medium dexterity and sort of low wisdom on a monk, where I've got a +3 and a +2 for each of them respectively, just it hurts in the early levels. It hurts a lot.
I mean, we're talking stats here. The warlock has a higher intelligence than the wizard.
That is a fair point.
Yeah.
That pains me every time.
It's only one, like...
And he is using it as his casting modifier, so it makes sense.
It's the one that's the difference between a +3 and a +4. One more level, and I can fix that.
Yeah, I have to start thinking about whether I want dexterity or wisdom as my next addition. Because wisdom is obviously going to help with, like, save DCs for my cool monk shit, but dexterity just helps me be, like, quicker, tankier, better frontline. It's level 4 and level 5 are difficult character decision times.
Yeah, I know what you mean about kind of monks, especially, are very like as a class, like as a base class, they are probably one of the most multi-attribute dependent classes. Yeah, which I've been thinking about a lot recently because of Tashes, and I really want to play an Astral Self monk because they look so much fun.
It's similar to the Barbarian, where you're like, oh, I need these 2 stats to be really big. Usually Barbarians, it's Strength and Constitution. But it's not like the Barbarian has a lot of spells, and it's not like you're making, like, spell saves against a Constitution spellcasting modifier.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's you want good strength and con, but if you really have to sacrifice, you can just put them all in strength and sacrifice a bit of the con.
Yeah.
Whereas dex and wisdom for a monk, they are almost equally valuable, because again, for the kind of attacks and AC, and then for, again, AC and saving throws, which for a monk are huge, because stunning strike alone is, with good reason, one of the most kind of recognizably overpowered abilities in the game, if you have a high enough DC to consistently pull it off.
I mean, with a barbarian, a half-orc barbarian in the party, paralyzed, big deal. Like,
getting some of those brutal criticals in there.
I love it. I love the fact that slowly I can see it taking shape in my head. This party is just going to be buff the barbarian. It is just going to be set it up for the barbarian to murk whatever we are facing.
That is not uncommon when you have a barbarian, though.
I know, but we've got the buffing and generally supportive cleric bard, which is already just buffing and helping. Yeah. We've got the monk who can set up stunning strikes and generally kind of crowd control, keep things locked down. We've got the Warlock, who, well, they're Warlocks. They can fill pretty much any position, but as spellcasters, they are generally kind of backline support, crowd control. And then we've got a Wizard who can just buff crowd control. So it is just going to be, throw an enlarge on the Barbarian, set up a stunning strike, pop a Bardic Inspiration, then just watch Ash go to
throw a
town.
haste on the Barbarian as well, just because. Just give him another attack, why not?
Yeah, off stream we did have this conversation when it came, like, eventually Phoenix will take haste because it's an amazing spell. And we had Britty ever so hopeful, like, oh, haste on a monk. I'm like, nah, I'm not giving. If I'm giving someone an extra attack, it's going to be the person doing D12s.
Yes, as much as it pains me to say it, he does make more sense. Buff the Barbarian, even though buffing monks is really cool.
You'll get your fair share of buffs. I'm just saying, haste's going to the Barbarian. That's where it's going to do the most damage.
Of course, I just need to throw some Woostos her way, but
Oh no! The Barbarian has to make an intelligence saving throw? What are we gonna do?
Oh, don't joke. I'm in a game recently where both Barbarians in the party have been eaten by Intellect Devourers.
Oh no.
Intellect Devourers are one of those creatures I'd be incredibly hesitant to ever include.
Oh, they are
They're
dangerous at any level.
great.
They are probably one of the most consistently dangerous low CR creatures other than Banshees.
Yeah.
And Shadows. Banshees, Shadows, and Intellect Devourers, I think, are the kind of...
You also got, like, Rust monsters that break non-magic weapons.
There are some.
It depends on the setting in the campaign. I think those become less of an issue later levels when you do have...
later levels when you've got, non-magic.
I'm saying, like, you can have a party of level 20s, and an Intellect Devourer is still dangerous.
A Shadow is still dangerous.
Shadow is still dangerous, yeah, because strength, if you're not a typical fighter or a barbarian, is so often a dump stat. I know I think it's been a dump stat on every single character I've ever made because I've never made a traditional barbarian.
Yeah.
Strength is just
one of those things
skills.
like there are times when I feel bad for dumping strength, but like I almost always do it because like otherwise I won't have a better score in a different stat that is more useful.
Yeah,
it's one of those. If the DM was generally more restrictive with carrying capacity, and you had to like properly play with like horses, carts, using bags of holding and handy haversacks correctly, all that kind of stuff, I can see why you'd want it as like a more. It is then just a useful skill. It's the kind of Fallout situation of so often you can just dump strength in Fallout because the only thing it really contributes towards is melee weapons and carrying capacity, and you can get by with low carrying capacity in those games. And if you're not playing a melee build, it's almost an entirely useless skill.
Yeah, it's one of these things like if there was one main critique I had with 5e, it would be to take some of the utility away from kind of dex and
wisdom,
to a lesser extent charisma, and then put them into intelligence and strength. Just so, like, when I'm making a build, unless I'm making like a heavy armor build, I always feel compelled to have at least dex 14, or I feel underpowered.
I think in 5e
game, like
it is annoying that even like with builds where your main attribute is strength, you still have to think of dex, and it's just like, oh, why aren't I just making a dex character? To be fair, is actually how I think on most of my characters. Is why I never use strength as my primary attribute, because even when strength is your primary attribute, you still need a high dex because it's just so important for everything else. So it's like, in that case, why don't I just make a primary dex attribute character?
Yeah,
I think there are ways to build around like not having dex. Like you can take plate and you can be like a paladin and have an increase to your dex saves because of your aura, but it doesn't change the fact that like, at least from my experience, dexterity and wisdom are just the two best stats in 5e. Wisdom is just so valuable.
I mean, I'd have to contest that it would be dex and charisma.
Yeah,
perception
I would say
and
charisma
insight
purely for the wealth of charisma casters. That would be.
Perception and insight to me are just such valuable skills. And proficiency helps, but getting a high base in them just makes them so useful.
I think the two most used skills in the game, discounting stealth because there's just a plethora of rogues, but it really only applies to rogues, is probably persuasion and perception. So I can understand wisdom, but I think in general, having a high charisma character is, from a skills point of view,
you want in a party one high charisma character, but I have been part of parties where I have dumped wisdom, and man, not being able to like do well on night shift feels awful.
See, I'm always a kind of plan ahead sort of person, so if I do have kind of a low wisdom character, it'd always be a case of I'll have something that can lighten the load, like a familiar or something that can give me advantage on the checks, or goggles of night, or something that can make up for the lack. Whereas not being, if you want to be charismatic and you just don't have the charisma, nothing really makes up for that.
No.
I also think that's dependent on the DM, because there are some DMs who are like, oh yeah, the way you worded this out makes a lot of sense for the character you're talking to, so you don't need to make a charisma check. They believe you.
I have recently, I recently saw something that was really interesting, introspective on how roleplay systems work in D&D, like how like charisma interactions. The words are escaping me here. But interactions with NPCs, like face interactions.
Yeah.
And it was a case of, yes, it can be really kind of unintuitive if you have a really charismatic player who says something really involved and makes sense in the world, and then they roll just a nat 1 on their persuasion check, and it just ruins it all. And it's jarring, and it doesn't make sense, and it just pulls you out of it. And they basically explored it, and is the way that it's supposed to sort of be run, and the way they run it, is anything that you say in roleplay, anything the player says, that affects something called the disposition of the NPC. So the NPC will be in one of 3 states, sort of neutral, hostile, or friendly. And the RP of the conversation affects that. So you can shift them 1 disposition higher or 1 disposition lower. And then all the roll does is, once they are in that kind of disposition bracket, it affects how much help they are willing to give. It kind of shifts the DC of what they're willing to do. So if they're friendly, all the DCs will be lower, and they won't say have the option of attacking you for getting a really low check. Whereas if they're hostile, the DCs will be much higher for any kind of help, and there will be additional options on the low end of the spectrum for attacking you or stopping you from having services. Whereas if they're friendly, there might be things on the higher end of the spectrum where they do things that would put them in mortal danger to help you, because you are both friendly to them and you are persuasive. I love that system. It made so much sense. It rewards both inventive roleplay and the kind of traditional luck-based aspect of dice rolling in D&D.
That's a good way to look at it. Something I'll have to... I think I know the content creator you're talking about. I may have seen the
undoubtedly,
video.
they're not exactly niche. But I think the video only came out like a week ago or so.
Yeah, I think I remember something like that. But again, we're stepping a bit into the philosophy of D&D and a bit away from campaign-specific type of deals. And actually, speaking of which, our party kind of has a face, but not really. We don't have
somehow.
We don't have the high charisma character who's also good at talking to people. I think the closest would be Althea, but I don't.
Well, Althea has 17 charisma because she is a bard.
Yeah,
Althea's an interesting case.
Second on 16. So like, they both have like modifiers to help them.
Yeah, we have characters with high charisma, but they're not always the ones going out and talking to people. Gareth, obviously, because he's much more secretive, but Althea has a much more shy disposition than most of our other party members, so very often she's not the one, like, reaching out and being, like, the first person to talk to people.
I think that she's not a leader.
Yeah, that might come to bite us in the ass later, and I think it will be hilarious if it does.
I do notice that Fenix seems to be making far more charisma checks than he has any right to.
I mean, it's because you're putting yourself in situations where they're called for. Like,
oh no, I absolutely understand why he's like, when it says like, oh, roll a persuasion check, I'm just sitting there going, oh, why have I done this? Why have
I've done this to myself.
this is going to go so horribly wrong because I've got a +1 charisma.
Always have to roll well. Sometimes
I have been so far, but it's a tenuous string that's not going to last very long.
Rolling well doesn't last forever, but high modifiers are pretty permanent.
You're not always going to have the most perfectly balanced party ever, and sometimes that's fine.
Oh yeah, I would not call our party balanced.
I mean, that's also a good character arc for Althea if she chooses to go that route. It's a case of she is someone who, applying herself, could be very charismatic and a very face character, but she currently lacks the disposition or motivation to step into that role.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that as a character arc, it is the potential for her to learn, yeah, you can be influential, you can be persuasive if you want to be. You have that innate skill to do so. Please, God, take it off Phoenix's shoulders.
Maybe you should try and push her in that direction.
No, Phoenix isn't the kind of character. Phoenix is just blundering through this.
She's a merchant. Obviously, she hopefully has seen people do these types of deals before. Maybe that can be a part of her training, and maybe as characters we can push her in that direction. But obviously, we're talking as players, not as characters right now. So this is going to be entirely dependent on whether our characters see this as reasonable.
Yeah, and ultimately it's Nat's decision if that is a path he wants out there to go down.
Obviously.
He could go the opposite route. He could go the opposite route of...
I don't want to be a merchant anymore.
Well, no, it should be an opposite route. I don't want that leadership position. It's not something that interests the character. Absolutely. They can be charismatic, but it's useful in niche situations where she wants to apply it, not as a general rule of being the bard.
Speaking of character backgrounds and, like, I suppose character history, going back to our first real episode where we were talking about the backstory of this world and everything that, like, created this place, the Gaecia, I guess you would say, like, the Gaecia history, super interesting, where they're basically a dead and dying species.
They're not dead.
Dying.
Hello, I'm still here.
I'm not dead.
I'm not dead.
Personally, I really like that, because that's going to add, especially in a party that seems to be very much about family and about how family matters. I think that's going to be a really big thorn in Phoenix's side, and I think that should be really interesting to hash out as characters.
Family. My people are dying.
Oh.
I mean,
I never wanted to come up in the context of Phoenix as just being a downer, but, like, it's one of those things. It's a big part of his life. It's a big part of any. I would imagine this is obviously that's a Ferret decision, but I imagine it's probably a big part of most Gaeaci's life, that this kind of overriding knowledge that your species is dying and there is fuck all you can do about it, theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, when I was, like, making the world and going through all the races, like, right, where are they in this world? I tried to build in, several interesting things. So I picked a character to be, ooh, that's something you don't see. I'm going to do that and make a character around that, which is kind of what you did with the Gaecia. There's also, like, obviously the dwarves with the dead god. That's obviously something a bit different. Well,
that's not lie, Ferret. You really wanted someone to go play a dwarf.
I mean, there's benefits and negatives to it. Like, yes, it'd been cooler if someone played a dwarf and I could really amp up the whole, dead god thing. But that doesn't mean I can't still explore it. And obviously, I could do different things. Now,
yeah,
you're not a dwarf, and you've got to drown the party. Obviously, that's a whole different way to go.
Yeah, you just explore from the opposite side.
Yeah. And again, the A-Smarts, like, something that I don't think I've ever seen, is the kind of, like, they're just humans. Like, to everybody else, they seem human kind of thing. Obviously, that's very different. It's just something that, I had fun messing around with. Like, oh, then, just human plus, I guess, essentially. And again,
with a little bit of spice.
Yeah, spicy humans. Nom nom nom. Why did I say that? And obviously a game with Dragonborn, literally being made from dragons. Yes, it's a pun, but it's also something where, like, if you're making a character, that's something you can be, that's actually a cool idea, I want to play around that kind of thing. So again, like, if you're making a world in your races or in your countries or whatever you're doing, like make things that a player might go, that's so cool, I want to make a character around or incorporating that. Again, that's another bit of advice I would give someone who doesn't know how to go about it.
I mean, speaking of Dragonborn,
Yeah.
quite possibly the most important question any setting can ask of itself based on D&D. Do your Dragonborn have tails?
I mean, just through content I've been exposed in the past, whenever I picture Dragonborn, they have tails. But like, if you don't want your Dragonborn to have a tail and you want to think of them as not having a tail, that's fine.
Oh no, it's sorry. I bring it up jokingly because it's always, I find it's always like some weird huge point of contention that in 5e Dragonborn canonically do not have tails, and that's what distinguishes them from half dragons who do have tails, and that's like the big point of contention. It's half dragons have tails, Dragonborns do not, because in Forgotten Realms lore, Dragonborns are essentially just the humans of their dimension. They are not actually descended from dragons. But it's the thing of people like Dragonborn with tails because they look cooler and they want tails. So I was like, no, my Dragonborn has a tail. And it's just like, but that's not the law. Yeah, but it looks cooler. It's like, that's also
that
valid.
Is the question on Gaecia. Do Dragonborn have tails since they are more direct creations and descendants of dragons?
As I say, I always just picture Dragonborn as having tails. That's just the way I picture them. Like,
so Garrosh had a tail.
I guess, yeah, but like if you don't want to image that when you picture my Dragonborn characters, that's fine. Like I don't care. Like,
no, I have no particular sway either way. Like Dragonborn.
If you wanted me to make a Rawley, I guess say yes. That's just because it's my personal preference. Like
that does bring up kind of an interesting point for me as the person playing this character, because what happens if someone dies and they bring in a Dragonborn? How is Fleet especially going to react to that? I think that's... Ooh. Someone brings in a dwarf or a Dragonborn, Fleet might have some issues.
Not all dwarves kill drowned sight.
Yeah, like, obviously there's a little bit of irritation.
Your kind of country bumpkin is probably going to be less so.
I can't wait till we go giant spider hunting. Very close to the Old Gorn Mountains.
Oh,
That's going to be interesting.
We're definitely not going to run into a party of dwarves that are just, like, patrolling the mountains or anything. That'll never happen.
It depends how far you go. Like,
yeah, we die by then.
Give you an option. But, like, obviously, that's ages down the line. Like, I'm not thinking about that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
easily Fleet could die before then.
Oh,
we've got a lot of potential tasks to fuck up before then.
Like, you put that towards the end of your list, so I'm not thinking about it. Like, I'm mostly thinking about the unicorn, but that's mostly planned. And then you headed up to Flari next, actually, I think. So, yeah. That's where I'm thinking at the moment.
I can check that. We've got Faltorn Forest, and then Guxnam. Then Tarina, then Andma, and then Falari.
Yeah. Yeah,
I need to look... Phoenix needs to look into something in Guxnam.
As of course you do. Oh, yes, I did completely forget about that.
Well,
good point.
With that ending note, I think we're going to call it here. Thank you to both of you for joining me.
Yeah,
interesting, and I love playing with you guys, but I also enjoy being able to talk with you guys outside of character and like talk about what's going on in the game. There's a possibility that I won't be here next week, so someone else may be hosting, but our next game stream will be on Wednesday let me check my calendar so I know the actual date, Wednesday the 18th. At 8 p.m. Is it GMT or BST? I always get that mixed up.
It's GMT at the moment because I'm not on daylight savings. I just say UK time.
Okay, 8 p.m. UK time for any American viewers we have. That is noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. Thank you both again very much for joining me. Thank you to anybody in chat who was following along, and I hope that we'll see all of you next time.
Yeah, sure. Next time we'll have
Twitters and YouTubes. I'll be because I don't need to edit this one. I might just use a Twitch to just edit to upload straight to YouTube. So hopefully that might happen quickly. Yeah.
Again,
join us next time. We'll have
tuning in.
Yeah, we'll have different players, different perspectives. Should just as interesting.
Yeah. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.